at the last minute there, but now we are good to go. And we will continue on. Hopefully that's showing up just right for you. And this is Lisa Cebelak. We are so glad to have her here with us this evening, willing to share her thoughts and insight and from her experiences. She's been an ELA teacher for quite some time, working in the States and in Costa Rica, focusing on high school with her teaching career, and then working as an instructional coach at the secondary level for years, once again focusing on ELA for that. And then beyond that, she has worked nationally as a consultant for years. She has co-authored many books, including most recently the Peer Power book that's going to come out this fall. We're very excited about that. And I'm going to let her take it away.
Hey, thanks, Isaac. I'm so excited to be here, and sorry about that little glitch in the beginning there. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off. And if Isaac, you want to just share the information on the next slide about joining the network and how to tweet or get engaged, because I really want this to be a collaborative conversation. And I'm excited for everyone that joined. So there's my hashtag at Lisa Cebelak there. And then that next slide will have the TCC network information, that's your strong suit there. Isaac, if you can just go through that real quick.
Yes, and we are the core collaborative, and a large part of that is that we need all of you to collaborate with us. The best way to keep up with what we're doing is to check out our website, thecorecollaborative.com. You can join the Leading Impact Teams group on Facebook. For models of success, you can see excellent video of teachers, students, leadership teams, anything you can imagine on our YouTube site. No better way to learn than to see and hear what it is you want to be doing. Of course, we say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, we have millions of words worth of pictures on our Instagram, and love for you not only to follow and let us follow you back, but to tag us when you share the great things you're doing so we can celebrate together and grow the network. And then we joke about this, but we say if it's not on Twitter, then it must not really be happening in education. And I never thought I'd be saying this, but a great deal of the research I get turned on to now is thanks to Twitter. So follow us at The Social Core. And of course, follow Lisa, as she showed. She's at Lisa Cebelak. And we love to hear from you and love to share out what we have.
Thanks. And so we're going to go ahead and jump in and add. So the title of this had instructional coaches in the title, but this is really for any instructional leader, for teachers, for educators in general, because there's just going to be a lot of good information, especially when we get to the part about feedback and 4 stages of feedback. That's really important. So to cover what we're going to do in this next 50 minutes or so, here's some points of discussion. So we're going to quickly just talk about if you are an instructional coach or you're a leader of an instructional coaching program, how you might create one if you're just thinking about it, or how you might redesign your program to better fit your needs. And so we'll just chat about that for a little bit. Then we're going to really talk about appreciative inquiry as a roadmap for success and really start thinking about strength-based and appreciating one another. And that starts with asking the right questions. We're going to then focus on coaches as connectors, even though we have principals and leaders and other roles that work as connectors within a building, from building to district level. Instructional coaches can play a very valuable role in that. And so we'll talk about coaches as connectors and building that bridge. And lastly, we're going to end with focusing on feedback. Probably the question I get asked the most is how? That's really it. So when we talk about feedback and student self and peer assessing in the classroom, the question I really get is, that's great, now how? How do we do that? And so we're going to kind of hit that towards about the last 25 minutes or so. So hang in there. We're going to get going, and I would love to hear from you. And Isaac's kind of monitoring the chat feature and the Twitter along with Donnie, and behind the scenes. Thanks, Donnie. And also, Isaac really is my partner. This is really us kind of co-facilitating tonight, because he's been an instructional coach and he's got the strong elementary background. I've got a stronger secondary background. We both talk about it K-12, but really talking about feedback, we bounce our ideas constantly back and forth. So he's really a big thought partner for me. So we'll just go ahead and move on to the next slide. There we go. So the first question is just, if you do have an instructional program in your school or your district, or if you're thinking about creating one or changing it up, the question really starts with, does your instructional coaching program represent who you are as a collective whole? As the students, as the educators, the support staff, your leadership, does it really represent you as a collective whole? I'm going to talk about that just for a minute. So if we go to that next slide, what you're going to really see is that you can start from the beginning, from scratch, a clean slate, or you can start to change up the game. So the next slide really shows you an example of what I'm talking about. We're going to envision what that could be. It doesn't have to be a one way. So a lot of times I get asked, what instructional program should I follow? Or what is the best philosophy that we should follow? And I found that really what it comes down to is most instructional, if you want to call it a program or system or model, is really becomes a blended type of many things. And so that's why you see many colors here on the screen. And so to keep going with that theme for a minute, on the next slide, you'll see the color white representing that one size fits all. For example, you might just start, hey, we learned about this one model or this one way, and you might start there. And just try something. And then that blue kind of represents, you'll see hues of blue in there. So it's kind of like you might start with one way and start to think, hey, well, we need to tweak it to fit our needs here or modify it there. And then after a year or two, or maybe even 3, you start to think outside of the box and, hey, this has only taken us so far. It doesn't quite fit where we started. And so that colorful representation there over the right is, I've gone to different professional development trainings, or we studied something that we want to try, or our school improvement team really needs this, or with digital, natives, we need to work to better ourselves to prepare ourselves. So with all that in mind, we create this color palette. And so really it becomes customize it. Go ahead, make those decisions, be innovative, be creative, find something that really fits your needs, but take and choose, drop what's not working, try something new. And so I just wanted to share that, which leads us to this next first question for everyone, our first kind of chat or tweet. And this is your instructional program right now a blank slate? In other words, are you just thinking about it? Is it one color? You're just following kind of one program to get started, or that's all you know? Or is it a mix of colors? Have you been there? You're trying different things, and it's really a combination to really show a collective whole of where you are. So I'm just curious, for those of you online, where are you now? And we'll just give you a minute to chat out. And Isaac, when you're ready, if you can maybe read some of those out, that'd be fantastic.
You got it. And feel free to tweet those out to us too. There might be a little prize in there if yours gets retweeted. But more on that in a little bit. Yeah.
I just realized
this thought's coming up.
Looking at you now, Isaac, instead of
right.
But we have the same blonde hair, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So there's somebody mentioning that they're really thinking about adding some more instructional coaches now. So it seems like this is a great time to be thinking about this, thinking about building on those successes you've already had, really taking time to identify those successes and then analyze, okay, what led to that success and how can we spread that as you bring on new people? Because each time you bring those people on, that changes the collective, which means we're going to be changing, our output. I love seeing this. Ours is a mix of colors, many approaches, probably one color from one, but very much focused on professional development surrounding curricula. So I'm assuming, but would love to hear more if maybe that's because the district identified that need. So they've really focused in. Some other thoughts about mixes of color, saying many approaches, lots of things that really need to be tried out so they can evaluate and then see what is working best for their own teachers and their own students.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to have John Allen in just a minute talk just for a minute or two there was a coaching program, and this is in Jurupa in California. And one thing that I really loved about them, and I wanted just to showcase that program just for a minute, is that they resisted the urge to pull their coaches out of the classroom the whole time, which a lot of times that's maybe what is suggested, going to different PDs or going through trainings. And the coaches really wanted to stay in the classroom at least for an hour or two, and he can explain how elementary, secondary did that. But what that meant for the coaches and then the other teachers to see that they still worked with students along with working with their adult peers. So John, if you're online, if you could just talk about that just for a moment.
Sure, I'm here. Hi. Can you hear
Hi,
me?
John. Hey,
Yes.
and I can see you too. Hi, John.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. It's sunny in Southern California right now. We're loving it. Well, yeah, we decided 5 years ago that we really needed practitioners that were working in the classroom to have that authenticity to be able to still, be relevant when they're doing their coaching. Big complaint in the past with previous coaching programs was that, you don't really know what we're going through. You're out of the classroom. You can't feel our pain as we learn new programs. So we decided to look to our pool of unit of study writers in math and language arts and in K through 12. And we hired 17 teachers to work in the classroom as instructional coaches. And so what that looks like in elementary was the two teachers would share a roster and share a full classroom and have what we call the demonstration classroom that teachers could come and visit. And then 50% of their time in K1, it was for 1 week on, 1 week off. So they'd be teaching and have full control of the classroom. And then they'd be out of the classroom for a week and just be doing coaching. And in grades 2 through 6, they had 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off as coaches. And in general, they had an overlap day. So on a Friday, they would both be in the classroom to kind of do the handoff. In secondary, grades 7 through 12, we had 3 ELA coaches and 3 math coaches. And they would have 2 periods of instruction in mathematics and 1 period for that prep. And then half of the day would be doing coaching. And so they'd be out and going into classrooms and they'd be visiting. It really there were really 2 big benefits. One was that teachers could go visit the coaching classrooms and view the coaches in action as they implemented strategies. And then the other was that the coaches could also travel to teachers' classrooms or go to an independent meeting place to collaborate with teachers. It really worked well.
Thanks, John. And I really think that was a really neat idea to have the coaches be vulnerable and to have teachers come in and watch them do model lessons or do whatever it is that they were doing. And I know those coaches, and a lot of them, they would say, don't just come observe, but provide me feedback. and what did you see? What were the strengths, and what do you feel I could work on? And that just really modeled that growth mindset all the way around. Another shout out was that we had a school in Hawaii that we were working with, and they wanted to come find out what you were doing. And we actually talk about connecting, brought them to California and shadowed the coaches and talked to them for a day. And they are now trying out at Roosevelt this year, just having coaches 1 hour a day at the high school level. And just getting their feet wet, but this was a big way for them to see what's possible. So thank you for that.
Sure. Thank
Powerful. You. And you've really set up a system that offers different entry points for teachers and creates those models of success that we can go and see and we can learn together. And then just as Lisa said, when you open up and begin with that vulnerability, it changes the relationship very much from let me show you or let me tell you to how can we figure out how to improve this together. And what better way to prove that this works than to have others want to come in from outside and see and hear it in action. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And so the next slide is really just some ideas for everyone, strategies for implementation, whether you're creating or redesigning, or maybe you're talking to instructional coaches that are coming in from the outside, that are coming in to support. You can still ask these questions from all your stakeholders. In other words, the teachers, the support staff. You might even talk to some students, the leadership teams. And some of these questions are, what do you want to see in an instructional coaching program? What are the benefits for you? I think sometimes they don't even get asked this. It's just a program has appeared. So some of these are some great questions to get started with. How do you envision working with an instructional coach? How can a coaching program strengthen our collective system? And so these are also examples of appreciative inquiry to look for those positive insights and to go from there. So just some ideas to get you started. And so that brings us to, unless Isaac, there's any kind of last minute thoughts before we kind of move on?
No, I think keep going. We've got some great things being shared. Just please make sure when you share that you select at that little 2 box, all panelists and attendees, and then everyone else can see your great thoughts and interact with you as well.
Awesome, thanks. So with Shine is this idea of really looking for the good, really looking for the positive. And I think with teachers, and unfortunately, at some point, sometimes they hear of instructional coaches are maybe working for the administration, or it's a gotcha kind of system. And so we really want to get past that deficit thinking and really start to think about a different way of doing things. So the appreciative inquiry really starts with wondering with what first questions to ask and where to start. So I'm going to read this it's a longer quote, but it's really good on this next slide. And it's from the Essentials of Appreciative Inquiry, a roadmap for creating positive futures, which is an article, and it's down there at the bottom so that you have that reference. And it says, a growing number of social scientists are coming to recognize that the process of studying a phenomenon actually changes that phenomenon, in effect creating a new reality during the process of inquiry. So appreciative inquiry can be a process for engaging people and building the organizations they and the world that they want to work and live in. So I'm just going to let that sit for a moment. So if we're doing some inquiry work, and for those of you who are part of the core collaborative and do impact teams, and maybe you're in your 2nd or 3rd year and you're doing inquiry work, we're seeing this more and more come to light. So if that process of inquiry, that question that you ask, just the question you ask actually starts to change the behavior. So it's really starting to think about this in a different way. So let's go this next slide, and this, let me give you an example here, and relating it more to education. So instead of thinking about breakdowns and malfunctions and thinking about what's not working, what do we think we need to fix? How are we going to solve it? Let's solve it. That type of thinking, to instead we start to think about what are the peak experiences and what are the successes that we can build on. What would, let's just envision for a minute, let's just dream big. What do we see as what we envision, what our values are? What would be that end result that we are looking for? That what do we feel we could really achieve if we all got together? And starting with that question, and think about the differences of answers you would get if you asked that. What would you like as a collective for us to achieve in this building, at this grade level, in this district? And what responses might you get versus what are the things that we need to fix? What's not working and how are we going to fix them? I just caught my tone even changing when I just went to that. I don't know if you caught it, but that wasn't intentional. But now that I think about it, that it changed the excitement level real quick. So that's just an example there of what we could look at. If you go to the next slide, and I'm just gonna, you're gonna need to kind of click through the breakdowns and malfunctions, but this is some examples. You can just click them off. What's wrong with people in this PLC? Why isn't our team doing better? Why are school scores so low? Why is there conflict? Who's the cause of it, versus those peak experiences? Tell me about the time when you worked in a team setting and performance was high. What did that look like? What did that feel like? What were you doing? What were others doing? What factors were present that supported this moment? And the last one there, how might this team function if we could expand the conditions that led to past successes? Mm-hmm. So it's really thinking about our individual stories. Where have we been successful in the past? How can we replicate that? What were the conditions that led to that? And how can we replicate that and really think big? So
and I love, of course, you make that ELA connection to the story. And then other people's personalities are coming through in what they're sharing, where they've had these peak experiences. One mentioned essentially going through the gradual release of responsibility with a coach and having modeling, then co-planning, and then, reflecting together on video evidence of independent practice. I love this quote here: envisioning a possible positive future is invigorating, which you literally felt in yourself. And then this idea that the good questions evoke reflection and magnify possibilities. And then this word ignite that keeps coming up in so much of what we're doing and reading and seeing. But ignite an insatiable, I can't say this word apparently, insatiable curiosity and a need to manifest a new possible. So powerful.
That is powerful.
And then the idea that it pushes coaches to ask the right questions. Then another coaches take the coachee, their partners, from where they are to where they want to be, where that educator or that child or any learner in the system wants to be.
It's a learner-centered system. It's everyone's a learner in this. That's absolutely right. And the next slide is really talking about the it can be so simple. And it says appreciative inquiry is an emerging approach to organizational transformation based on a deceptively simple premise that organizations grow into the direction of what they repeatedly ask questions about and focus their attention on. And I love that. I love that focus, and I think sometimes we get down on ourselves. Teachers get down on themselves. There's just so much that we need to create that energy back in, not just for students, right? Engaging students, but re-engaging our teachers in those buildings and districts, and really repeatedly focus on something so simple, but that's so positive. And the next slide is, I just wanted to give a shout out that this is just more than positive thinking. This is, it's really thinking really to the heart of it. What is it that you value? And I think this starts with you individually. So if you go to the next slide, it talks about taking a moment for yourself and being reflective. It starts with you. So before you can have a collective idea of what you want and what can really be, it really starts with, what do you first value? What do you envision? And then share it with others, right? And then what do they envision? And then figure out what is that positive intent, so that you have that conversation, these conversations first, before just jumping on and, what do we need to fix? So with that brings us to just a pause. And I know you read out some things, but I did want to pause and just ask, what if your organization focused on what could be instead of what needs to be fixed? Or really, here's a more positive, what's happening now that focuses on strengths? So either way, what's resonating with you right now? And I'll have Isaac, if you don't mind, shout a couple of those out. I'd love to hear from everyone and see what you're thinking.
And we already have one from Facebook that says yes. And I'm reading that with the emphasis it has. You've got to do that inquiry around system success. Find those successes at all levels and find great ways to identify them, describe them, share them out, so we can build on that. I just want to remind everybody, as you share within the chat, make sure you choose all panelists and attendees, because some of these great thoughts we're getting, they're moving so fast that I may not realize at first it's not going to everybody. But we'll give you just a minute to share out your thoughts. And then once we move on, if we get a few more, we'll stop and share those out as well.
Well, we're pausing. I'm just looking through the chat real quick, and I see Jazzy Jasmine. Shout out to my New Orleans girl. Hello. And I'm seeing some people from California and Washington. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. Oh, I wish I could talk to everyone. Okay. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
We'll have personal follow-ups.
Okay.
When we imagine what we could be, and we imagine what success looks like, we have a better chance of reaching our goal. And that makes so much sense. How do we know, how do we know what it's going to be if we haven't taken that time to look at success? And so often we know what maybe that result is, but do we know what the process of success looks like? Do we know what it looks like on our kids and on our teachers and on ourselves? And then I just love this, short and sweet, but powerful. Envisioning works. See it, then do it.
Yeah, great.
Well, let's keep moving, and then I'll interject as more thoughts are shared out.
Great. So we want to get to this idea of collective teacher efficacy. And so for those of you who have heard of John Hattie's work and visible learning, you're probably aware of the collective teacher efficacy is a 1.57, which is extremely high. And for those of you who aren't familiar with visible learning work or Dr. Hattie's work, just know that the high effect size, one of the best things that you can do in your schools, in your district, is to really have that collective efficacy. And that's when everybody is just, yes, we are all on board. We all have the same vision. We're all connecting to each other. And so I won't spend a lot of time on Hattie's work here, but just know that that effect size is really big. And so with that, then, is just some strategies for starting to think about appreciative inquiry. So that next slide is just some ideas.
And the 2-second summary of what that number means is you're approaching 4 times the learning in your set amount of time. And time is that one factor that we really don't have control over. So when we take advantage of these high impact practices, we can learn more and learn more deeply and learn more positively within the time constraints that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so for this, that leads us to strategies for implementation. So for that collective efficacy, we need to sometimes just pull it back and just do some inquiry work. So here's some ideas for you from all stakeholders. Again, this is from the Essentials of Appreciative Inquiry. I adapted it a little bit, but here's some examples. So for yourself, what do you value most? Your work. What are you feeling best about your work? What do you value most about your work? Your organization. So this could be your team. You could have this discussion at a team level, a grade level, within a whole school, a bigger discussion with the district. What is it that they value? What's the most single thing in your organization has contributed to your life? Core life giving factor. What do you think is the core value or factors that allows the organization to pull through during difficult times? That's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 wishes. If you had 3 wishes for this organization, what would they be? And just starting from there is just some suggestions for you.
And that's a great time to be thinking, what might you try next in your team, in your system, in your school? Some great ideas there.
Right. The next thought is to really think about coaches as connectors. So if we're going to have collective efficacy, we really need to make sure that knowledge is being shared. So I have this bridge here. So that's not on one side or one grade level or one department or one school versus another school. Is that we need this knowledge to flow back and forth and get a pulse on the culture of the school. It keeps it from being toxic when everyone feels they're in the know and they know what's going on. So I'm going to just share a few slides here that are actually Paul Bloomberg's, and he did this as his dissertation, and I won't go in too deep, but the first one, so these are nodes. It's a social network theory here. As you see the key up on the right, the gray dots are nodes, and then the ties, they're kind of the sticks, the ties that go between them with an arrow that points the direction. So some only point one way and not both ways. And then the red is the district. District level, like central office perhaps. And then the site would be your building or principal level. And so with there, I just want you to look at this just for a minute and think about what you're seeing here. Just give you a minute to check it out. So as you're looking at it, you might notice some of the nodes are small. Some of them are really big, especially that one big red one in the middle. You'll see arrows getting pointed, a lot of arrows pointing to that red, the bigger node in the middle there. You see some arrows that are like on the farther outskirts. Arrows are only going out, pointing, but it's not a reverse coming back in. So if you think about that, what do you think about knowledge? What do you think about the collective efficacy field that might be happening here in this whole school organization? And if you go ahead and click to the next slide, you'll notice a very different picture or portrait. Mm-hmm. So there, the same key, what are we noticing here? You're probably noticing, oh, wow, there's a lot of communication going on. There's a lot of ties. I'm seeing arrows going back and forth all over the place. You see much more people on the outside that are connected on their way in. A lot more communications happening. There's more medium-sized nodes and not just one big one and a few little ones out there. So this is a really big difference. It's a shared community. And if you click to the next slide there, Isaac, I think here is to think about if we really go back to this idea that instructional coaches can be connectors of knowledge, connectors of the culture, connectors of what's being questioned and asked, connectors of information. Because sometimes when we rely on our leaders, they get caught up, they get busy, they don't often get into a teacher classroom as much as they can. They're, so coaches can become a real valuable tool in really helping this collective efficacy happen. So being a school or a district on the left versus the right is a really big difference. So you think about it, think about people's values and how connected they feel and see in the difference there. And so that brings us back to the next picture here, was this idea that, bridges go both ways. You can't just go to one side and get stuck, right? You got to be able to get back. And so how are we moving back and forth? How is communication happening throughout your building, throughout your grade level, throughout your district? If you have instructional coaches coming in from the outside, sometimes this is where you get stuck. Because it's hard to get the information from the in back out too. So you really want to think about who, it might not be the instructional coach, but who are other people that might help to build these bridges. Mm-hmm. And just a reminder on the next slide is just that it's this 1.57, like Isaac was saying, that's just a big deal. We don't have a lot of time, but spending time on collective efficacy is so, so valuable. What are you thinking, Isaac?
We're getting lots of thoughts and reactions as we go. I'll let you keep going, but it's really fun for me to really see so many similar thoughts coming up with like a little bit of a different take on it. And then I've loved some of these little thoughts, like this one I do have to share, but the bridges not only help you get back and forth, but they help you do it without drowning. And so
my gosh.
And keep that important info above water.
That's awesome.
The metaphor just a little bit, or the analogy.
I love this. And see, someone out there is connecting with us, and now we're getting the value of that information. So thank you. And so the next slide really here is just to really think about this, is building these bridges, right? To help keep educators and systems connected. And I think sometimes but sometimes coaches maybe feel cornered, as if they only talk to teacher individually, one-on-one. And really what I'm saying is, let's push the boundaries and really talk about, we need to connect to students, we need to connect to teachers, but not just an individual teacher. It could be a group of teachers. It could be that PLC or team, or we call it a core collaborative, impact teams, even the support staff. The administrators, right? We need to talk to administrators. And what are those? What is the school improvement plan? Where are we? What are we hearing from central office? And not only what are we hearing, but let me go to central office and let me represent what I'm hearing from some teachers and support staff and other people. And just like we did with Harupa and Roosevelt in Hawaii. And I know Paul just did this not too long ago, not Paul, but the schools, right? From Fort Bend, Texas, went and visited schools in New York City, and so just other schools and systems to get connected into even a huger network. Like the core collaborative, for example, but that was our way in to share, so you could find your own ways to even go and visit other schools or systems and stay connected on a much, much bigger scale. So we'll go to this next slide, and that pause for a moment, just to say, how can your system create connectors? Or if you have instructional coaches and you're playing around with that, how can coaches work to help others to stay and feel connected? So I will pause here for a minute, let Isaac read out some of your tweets or chats or Zoom talks.
Yeah, this idea has come up a few times, that we have to value the voices of all stakeholders and how much can be missed because we literally don't know what we're missing when we don't have connections. So that idea you shared of how important the density of that network is to the learning and to the depth of the learning and how long it's going to last. Well, the idea that, coaches can make those connections because they may be bouncing from point to point to point. But as you're just saying, can connect people not only within that school, but between schools, within larger systems, and then across the country and even beyond, as we've seen.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get going because I wanted to get to the feedback portion. And so the next slide is really the evidence-based feedback. So again, if you've followed Hattie or the research lately, you would see the 3 questions keep coming up, or versions of these 3 questions, where students ask, where am I going? Where am I in the learning, and what do I need to learn next? And so the feedback process that we're talking about through the core collaborative is really looking at the basic stages of that feedback. So I'm going to go right into this portion, and that is really getting to the heart of it, is that students need to be able to they need to be taught how to self-assess. And then they need to be taught how to peer assess and set real learning goals. And I think sometimes we get this, an attempt to do it, but then teachers kind of maybe fall back and they're not quite sure how to move forward. And the reason why I say this is because that's kind of the biggest question I get. So this next slide, I'll talk to you about what we're talking about here. And so it's the co-construct success criteria. So we need clarity, right? It all comes down to clarity, teacher clarity, student clarity. What is it that I'm being asked to do? And so when you co-construct success criteria in that classroom, the students feel very a part of it. They have better understanding. They're able to really think through this process. And then we need to work on teaching students how to apply that criteria, right? How they can apply it so that they can start to self-assess and peer assess. Then students, we need to be able to work with them of how to give good quality feedback. So it's the quality of that self and peer assessment, right? We can't just put a stamp on it and say good job or nice work, but really the quality that drives the clarity for a student to improve their work, their process. And then that last bit is to help students really develop real learning goals and action plans that really involve their next steps for the where they're going next in their learning. So with that in mind,
as you've gotten to that, I just want to let you know, 400 more comments have come up, including things like lots of hearts and love all of this.
Oh, yay.
That coaches can really help others feel connected by creating that clarity with the vision of the school, so they know how they fit into that, and how they fit into that mission and vision. And that one way to do that is by visiting PLCs or impact teams and really sharing that same message to find, okay, what's happening here that I can share out. And then especially for so many of our partners who are more rural, or maybe are in a smaller school or a smaller district, of course we can use Voxer, Flipgrid, Basecamp, Google Hangouts, Zoom, which we're on right now. So many different ways that we can connect beyond. And then maybe, so often maybe a coach is someone who has the opportunity to go to learning outside, their state or their city and make those connections where you can't always physically bring in those new connections. But how hard is it now to set up a video chat in the room, in your meeting, on a phone or an iPad even? So lots of ideas coming out and similar themes, just the power of coaches as connectors and this focus on the positive and the successes we have. So I hated to cut you off right in
No, those were amazing.
Coming up.
Oh my goodness.
Feedback on that feedback process and developing metacognitive strategies. Lots of good things coming. I'll let you take it back and I'll keep monitoring.
Okay. Yeah, because I totally want to read them. That's amazing. Awesome. I can't wait to read them more in detail. Thank you. So we get to this. This is it. This is my most frequently asked question, really, when it comes to feedback, is I get asked how. Okay, I get it. I get these different stages. I get we're supposed to co-construct, and self and peer assessment and teacher clarity and student clarity is all about it. And that's high effect size. And it's worth our time and we want to do the work, but how? And I think here's where we just have to take a breath and say, okay, let's start really thinking through it.
We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty again. I apologize for that. While we get that fixed, what we're going to jump into now is a little bit more of that discussion on how, and maybe addressing some of your puzzles of practice as we dig into feedback and how that can work as a connector, and how that can work between everything else. And I'm going to let Lisa take back over.
Okay, can everyone see the screen? It should say feedback how. Could someone give me a chat out there and just say, see it? We're good? Oh, okay, got it. Can everyone hear me? We're on? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're moving on. So that how, what I was saying is the how is the frequently asked question. So when it comes back to feedback, I know I need to work on co-construct, or I'm really interested in self and peer assessing with my students, and I see the value. I know the effect size is high, but how? You know, really walk me through it. So this part, going to the next slide, is really going to just talk about, can you hear me, Isaac? Are we there? If you can you click? There we go. So this is really my, just an example is it's all about the planning. So it's all about the planning. So if we just take it and break it down for a minute, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. So if you go to the next slide. Are we there? There we go. So it's the pre-work for planning for success. So before we jump in with our students, really working with our teacher groups, or the few teachers that maybe teach your subject, and really thinking about deciding on the focus standards, really unpacking for collective understanding, working to create or modify a rubric you might have, and address any academic vocabulary, and then plan for some co-construction. So when you get here, where it says co-construct student success criteria, if we look here, this is really the planning. The teacher really needs to prepare, share with the students, what is the focus standard, a part of it, or the part of the unpacked portion you're going to hit. Be ready with the necessary academic vocabulary. Have effective examples and non-examples ready to go. Have students that they can watch a video or some other means as exemplars to spark that conversation. Ask questions to clarify meaning. Have the students work to agree as a collective to build that final success criteria. So students really need to look at those examples and non-examples and really brainstorm along with the teacher what the success criteria could be. If you move on to the next slide, then we have how to apply that success criteria. So we would have the teachers would really need to first model, do that think aloud, right? Highlight or annotate with an exemplar. Show the students how going back and forth from the success criteria to the exemplar, so that they really can see it, that you've modeled it before we've done a guided practice, which leads us to that guided practice. Have them really look at that and show them something that's not quite proficient, but maybe close. Have the students analyze where the strengths or what's missing or confusing. Have them go back to that success criteria that you co-created and look for that, where they can annotate on that and really look and try to figure out, discuss with the peers, provide that feedback for the teacher, where the teacher can then continue to guide them and do that repeated practice as necessary. So then after that guided practice, if we move on, it's really now, let's not give them independent practice, but this is the big one here that I think a lot of people are missing. And we need more of this, but we need collaborative group work in the classroom, but we need the students to be on task, on topic. We need them to be looking at success criteria. We need to give them something very focused to work on. And this works beautifully for here because it really brings back that student collaborative work where they have the chance to work with different peers. But they're using it around the success criteria that guides their group work. And they're able to apply their past past practice, because they not only heard the teacher model it, but they did some guided practice around it. And they're able to get that feedback from peers in that collective group. And then from that, get feedback from other groups working on the same thing. And they're able to work out those misconceptions and gain some clarity. So the last point here with collaborative groups, moving on, is really that then once they do that and kind of worked it out, now they can work to create a collective proficient piece of work together, and then give each other and receive that peer feedback using success criteria. So we suggest tag, for example, letter feedback. That's all in our peer power book coming out, and you can even just Google those and have templates there. But then they can have a chance to revise their own work as collective and calibrate that final work as a whole class, where the teacher really then provides the ultimate feedback at the end. With that feedback, moving on to the next slide, we want to make sure that there's feedback on feedback.
And I just wanted to say for all those last pieces that if you want to see those in action, check out that YouTube page.
Yes, thank you. We have on the YouTube page of the Core Collaborative, we have teachers working with tag. We have teachers working through letter feedback. We have a great one with the teachers trying it for the very first time, not only being vulnerable in front of his students, but in front of all of us so that we can learn. So there's so much there in that YouTube that we have videos of teachers working with students in the classroom. Thank you for reminding me, Isaac. And so here, we do need to talk about feedback and feedback. What does quality feedback look like? Do you have an exemplar of it? I've seen some classrooms and where teachers provide, put up a board that says quality feedback and really show students what it looks like with their own student work. Allowing the students to really look at that feedback and here's what's real important too, is real-time revisions based on the feedback, not waiting, not saying next time, but right then and there, being able to make those revisions and really gain that metacognitive skill of doing it right then and there and celebrating their successes along the way. And so the last slide really kind of says, okay, once students are good with that, then they're able to use these metacognitive strategies and they're able to plan for their next steps because they've got it. They've got the clarity now. And then we can check on them. Teachers can check on them with these short-term examples like a journal entry or an exit ticket, or long-term examples, when something's going to be a longer time frame, maybe a real quick conference one-on-one about their action steps. But there's different ways to do that. And this is where coaches can be really helpful, that they can really work with individual teachers. They can work with teacher teams, school teams. They can go in there and co-teach. I know that's something that some teachers really struggle with, how to work a co-teacher, or they just want somebody to come in and take risk with them. And that coach can also, work with a group of students and say, hey, here's what's working, not working, and help out. And a lot of times for coaches too, they need to be vulnerable themselves and say, if I can't help and you're really focused in a subject matter that I can't help support when it gets this specific, let me connect you to the right person. So I know someone else doing this work that's a teacher. I could go cover his classroom and maybe he could come in and co-teach with you at one point, or you could go visit him, but they have the knowledge because they're connected in to be able to get them to the right person to help support them and spread that knowledge and work to build that collective efficacy. And I was going to bring in
comments as you go.
Oh, okay.
Just focusing on how powerful that feedback is and how important that idea of being able to revise right now. And it's so often we don't get that chance, but we have the power to make that happen with these connections you're describing. And then I won't hit them all because there's far too many to catch up with. But a lot of reactions to, just these ideas of, for kids and for ourselves, seeing those examples, seeing those non-examples, and how those discussions together clarify everything for us and take us deep with, okay, we said we've envisioned success. Now let's get clear on how to get there. And let's even clarify more. What does that success look like? So a great discussion happening in the background that you're
Awesome.
inspiring.
I can't wait to read them all. One thing I know we're coming close to the end here. I do want to give out a shout out to Gina Burt, who's from the state of Washington, who's an amazing instructional coach, along with her partner, Rhonda, who I don't think could be on tonight. But with Gina, she went through this process with the English teachers in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, middle school level. And I believe she then did it with math as well. Any just, I know I'm putting you on the spot, Gina, but any just quick ways in like 60 seconds or less, what was the value or what was the outcome of going through this and taking the time to plan? I believe you planned, was it all day planning?
Yeah, it was all day planning, yeah. The clarity that the teachers got from going through this process, they knew exactly what they expected from their students. They were able to communicate their expectations. They co-constructed the success criteria with the students. So then they took ownership of, oh, well, this is what we're noticing from these mentor texts. This is what is expected. And we are working on introductions to begin with. And they collaborated in their small groups to, John mentioned the highlighting what was in the pieces that was meeting the success criteria. And it really took on a life of its own. The kids were so engaged and teachers just kind of sat back and let this magic happen and provided feedback where it was needed. And we saw amazing results with that unit. It was great.
And was this, when in the beginning here, I said it was really the planning part of it. So they really planned for all these steps along the way before they jumped in, right?
Correct. So they planned how they were going to, they planned the unpacking of the standard. Then they planned, okay, this is how I'm going to introduce this writing of an introduction to the class. I'm going to show them mentors. I'm going to show them an almost proficient. I'm going to show them a proficient. They're going to notice the difference. This is what I'm expecting them to notice. And then if they're not noticing these things, I'm going to prompt them to notice these things.
Yeah, you got to plan for it.
And then my teachers went through the next step, and you led them through this when they were saying, I'm going to, with the small groups, I'm going to show them the same new mentors with the same success criteria. They're going to work in their small groups to work together, to collaborate, to work through that success criteria. And then they switched papers with another group. So they got another opportunity to see where kids were self-assessing and peer assessing those papers. And then they moved on to doing it independently. The whole thing was planned out step by step.
Awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to show that it can be done. And I think sometimes when we ask teachers just to jump in and to try things, or we don't give them that time to plan, things fall apart. So planning for the success, I think, really helps. And then as a group, it's, hey, let's try it. Let's see what this is about. So thank you so much for sharing that, Gina. Really appreciate it. And Isaac, I know we're getting towards the end. So that slide that says shine with the light, and there, feedback, there we go. So this is the one that I just kind of wanted to end with thinking about, is just really, so instructional coaching, just really kind of thinking about it, imagine what it could be, ask those inquiry questions, the appreciative inquiry, start with the positive, become a connector. Or if you're in a school and you're, who are your leaders that you can think, how am I connecting? How are we getting our flow? How's our flow going? And then the last one is, if we have to pick one thing to focus on, because sometimes instructional coaches are so overwhelmed, and I know you have school improvement plans and all of this and that, but if one suggestion is to think about focus on that feedback, that formative process, not feedback as a thing, as an assessment that, a product, but that formative assessment process that really happens in the classroom. And I think that's where you gain so much so much understanding and achievement and a sense of belonging from your students that they're part of their learning with that. So with that, Isaac, I'm going to hand it off to you. I know you do kind of like any last minute things you want to read or do, or but thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it as Isaac wraps this session up.
Well, and thank you, Lisa. This has been powerful, and that's the questions and comments that are popping up right now are a lot of thank yous and what it's meant to people to be a part of this conversation. And that's what it is a conversation together. And you've made a connection for us and between us. As you can see, we continue our third Thursday Core Collaborative Master Classes next month, as always. And we're very excited to have Principal Paul Martuccio coming to share about empowering teacher teams to really expand student ownership of learning. And this has been powerful work, and I know you'll not want to miss it. It was very popular at ASCD in Chicago, and their message of success and of a pathway to success is one they're happy to share and one you're going to enjoy. So find us then, May 16th. It is so powerful for us to have these connections, and as we mentioned earlier, there's so many ways now to connect when you can't be in the same place. That doesn't mean there's not a different power to being able to come together face to face and to share and to grow together. And as you can see, we have our national collaboratives coming up, and we used to joke about this, but it's true now. We're always in a city near you at some point throughout the year across the country, and we hope you'll come to visit us. Of course, any of these are powerful. We did want to mention Peer Power, which is coming out later in the year. You can be checking out some videos that we have going for that and look for that hashtag Peer Power. And I have to say, of course, Lisa is one of the co-authors of this book, which you're going to love. So look forward to that, reading her chapter on secondary ELA. And one of those collaboratives that we're the most excited about is our Mind Fueled conference. And the tagline for this is that it is more than a conference. It's an experience that's going to change you, and you will see, as it's been true for each of the previous ones, it is all about connections and about how we grow as a collective. Just the other day, I was having an interview with somebody about some new work coming up, and one of the questions she asked is, well, why did you join the Core Collaborative? I won't get into that answer now because it's a long one, but a big part of it is the experience I've had and the sense of belonging that comes with being a small part of Mind Fueled. And we hope that all of you have an opportunity to have that and to take away the great things that our network has to offer. And in closing, this has all been about connections, and the bridge does go both ways. We learned so much from all of you, and really hope that you'll continue to share your new learning and your new successes and your paths to success. You can join us on the Leading Impact Teams group on Facebook. Find those videos on YouTube at the Core Collaborative. And then, of course, send us your own. We'll make you famous too. And then we love to see your pictures, and we love to share the success we're seeing on Instagram. And then, of course, I'm checking that Twitter feed, and I'm going to be sending out a couple of surprise prizes to some of our friends on Twitter who've shared out a few things and had those retweeted or liked or have shared the conversation out. Once again, in closing, thank you for spending your evening with us. We know that your time is so valuable and your attention is possibly even more valuable. And we value you for what you've made this. Lisa, just to let you know, there's a long list of thank yous. Anyone who wants to get in touch with us after, please reach out. I'm Isaac at thecorecollaborative.com, and Lisa is Lisa at thecorecollaborative.com. Thank you all, and we're going to sign off for tonight.